perspective on life at Comp and Western U, but only a very small handful know what it was like to see the college and the university grow from the very beginning and from within the family that started it all. Dr. Richard Pomerantz, one of Phil and Harriet's two sons, can definitely say, "I knew all this when." He's agreed to speak for the family about these past 38 years. Will you please join me in welcoming Dr. Richard Pomerantz? Good evening. Wow, if I knew I was going to get that many whistles and applause, then maybe I should just stop right now. We had talked originally when I was told that there was an opportunity to speak about my parents and about our family, that we were trying to keep it close in time. So I will go ahead and apologize right now. This is not really short, but I have truly edited out as much as I possibly can. And hopefully what we're going to do is kind of step back a little bit and tell you some of the history you may or may not know. And I've tried to keep it on the family side so that everyone else here who's talking about the university and the college when it was Comp will cover those areas. So let's go ahead and start back, because this obviously is a retirement party, but it's really much more than that. This is a celebration of the achievements of my parents as a team and their commitment of 38 years to the university. My distinguished father and beautiful mother are a living example of what greatness can be accomplished by a man who has a supportive, active, and loving wife who he listens to. They are very seriously a partnership, and they approached every aspect of their life in that way, whether it was speeches, governance, parenting, accreditation, visioning 5-year plans, home economics, faculty matters, or what have you. Success was achieved when they worked as a partnership. Now there is an important point of clarification here for many of you, that while my father has given literally hundreds of speeches over the years, what most of you may not know is that my mother wrote them. And many of those stories and anecdotes and even jokes were hers, so credit to Mom. Let me share with you more of the behind-the-scenes stories that you might not know. It all started in a small home south of the tracks in New London, Connecticut. My grandfather, Harry Pomerantz, had emigrated from Russia to ultimately become a small business owner, a tailor. He demonstrated a strong and consistent work ethic for his son Philip to model. My grandmother, Pauline Pomerantz, was always an extremely compassionate woman. And she taught my father that he should live a life that was a continual tribute to caring. One of her famous lines was that it's nice to be nice, and it doesn't cost anything. When my father was 19 years old, his father suddenly passed away, leaving him to fill the shoes of father figure to his two younger brothers. That didn't last long, as he was called off to serve in the army during the Korean War. Of course, he wasn't sure why exactly he was fighting the Korean War in Frankfurt, Germany, but he had plenty of time to figure that out as he worked his way through the myriad of beer gardens and dance halls. I had more stories to share here with you about his service to our country and those European locales, but my mother edited them out of my speech. So we're going to have to skip forward to post-military service. But I do encourage you to press my father for those stories at a later time. Upon leaving the Army, and actually before I even say this, I want to point out back over here at a table, there's a person in the room who knows or has known my father for longer than anyone else, including my mother, and that is Ralph Bernstein. He's here with his wife, Leah. Ralph, if I'm correct, it's 74 years that you've known my father? 74 years. They went to high school together, they were roommates in college, and so they're here tonight to honor my parents as well. So upon leaving the Army, my father underwent the standard psychological exam that's given to all servicemen and women, and they said he was crazy. I'm sorry. They said he was crazy to think about going to college. Since he was not smart enough, he should become a United States postal worker. And with great excitement of knowing he would have to no longer sit through boring lectures or exams, he told the great news to his mother that he was about to become a mailman. Well, since neither of his parents went beyond the 8th grade, he thought that this was a safe dream for a life of ease. My grandmother had other plans. She told him he was going to be the first in the family to go to college, especially since the GI Bill would make it possible. So here you have a first-generation American who was the first to go to college in his family, and off he went to UConn. Now during the summer, one of the summer breaks, we're not exactly sure which one, but he decided that as a young and handsome Phil, that he was going to go with his friends down to that party hotspot that was known as Ocean Beach, New London, Connecticut. Not quite Miami, but it's close. There he met a pretty young girl who was attending Smith College at the time, and she was very interested in hearing his stories about being a spy during the war. And many other stories that he made up to impress her. That girl was Harriet, and he made her wait for 2 weeks before he called for his first date. Harriet told her mother that the mountain had finally come to Muhammad. Harriet soon transferred to UConn, and they fell in love, and the rest is history. Now, in 1959, after graduating from UConn, my father became a high school history teacher. My parents were married in 1960. Not too long after my mother graduated from UConn as well, she also became a teacher. So imagine trying to grow up as the child of 2 teachers. Can't get away with anything. Parents moved into a small duplex that was actually owned by my grandmother, and my grandmother lived in one unit, my parents lived in the other. And this was at Garfield Avenue. So now we fast forward to life with children. My brother Andy was born in 1962, and during that year, my father became assistant principal at Tomlinson Junior High School. My parents purchased a home for their first home in Fairfield, Connecticut on Melody Lane. And my sister Betsy was born that year in the first year in their new home. 2 years later, 1965, I was born onto the scene. Now my parents are both very frugal people. My mother stopped teaching before my brother was born, and my father's sole earnings were not very significant in those days. As an example, our first dining room table was handmade by my father, since they couldn't afford to buy one. He went to the lumberyard and asked for a door blank. Now, stability was not a part of my father's table design. And he used thin banister legs, the rungs from banisters, for the legs. And of course, in order to make this work, the key was you had to get everyone cutting their meat in unison at the table. While my father would someday be referred to as a visionary, I can assure you that he was never referred to as a craftsman. To say he didn't know which end of the screwdriver to use is not really a mean thing to say, since it does give him credit for knowing that it was in fact a screwdriver. All right, so he wasn't the best at manual labor around the house, but My father's, one of his all-time sayings was that what he needed to do, and what we always needed to do, was to hire people who know more than you and get out of the way. And of course, this never stopped him from achieving goals when he could not afford to hire the right people. When he built his first office down in the basement on Melody Lane, he decided that the best look would be wood paneling, which he installed with a hammer and nails. He understood the concept, conceived the floor plan, but he miscalculated on the supplies required. Specifically, the number of Band-Aids used far exceeded the number of nails. He later claimed that he had invented the distressed wood look because of the assorted and very odd dents all over the paneling. I will tell you that what he lacked in manual skills, he more than made up for in love for his family, which included giving his children their bedtime baths, telling stories of bunny rabbits, and reading Hop on Pop. One thing that has been a part of my father's persona was created after he had decided to earn a PhD in higher education. He was intensely ambitious, as you all very well know, and he was drawn to stories of others with great ambition. He had seen the musical The Man of La Mancha and purchased the album of the soundtrack. And every morning, before beginning the long and sometimes painful process of writing his dissertation, my father would play one particular song from the album, The Impossible Dream. This became his daily mantra. This was his quest, to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far. This song gave him the strength to reach for stars that no one in his family had ever achieved, and that none of them had ever even dreamed of. It was the motivation to keep him on his path and overcome every obstacle as long as he remained true to that glorious quest. My father earned his PhD and went on to teach history at the University of Bridgeport. He later left teaching to pursue educational consulting, including the process of creating other colleges. Several years later, my parents built a new house in Fairfield and moved us across town. This was our first move as a full family. 14 months later, the offer to work full-time for the AOA in Chicago came in, and we made our second family move, this time 1,000 miles away to Deerfield, Illinois. Then, only 10 months later, the offer from the founding board of COMP came in, and we were about to make our third move as a family in less than 3 years. This time, another 2,000 miles to Upland, California. Coming from Deerfield, Illinois to Southern California turned out to not be all that bad for me. I may actually have been the happiest of the three Pomerantz children. It turns out that 1977 was the early days of the skateboarding craze. And I was an awkward teenager praying to become popular at school. So skateboarding in Illinois, you see, was a real challenge, since there weren't any hills or slopes, no in-ground swimming pools to convert into playgrounds, no half pipes to be found. I was about to move to the land of skateboarding, milk, and honey. I was the most envied sixth grader when my classmates found out, and that was just fine with me. I was getting out of winters at 70 degrees below zero and heading to skateboard heaven in sunny Southern California. Was my father a risk taker? Yes. Was he the right person to become the founding president of COMP? Yes. Was he a real visionary and a leader who could sell ice to Eskimos? Yes. Did he ever ask what we kids thought about gallivanting around the country? No. Did he ever tell me that I would be entering my fourth school in 4 years, which meant having to make new friends for the fourth time in 4 years? Absolutely not. I went from being the most envied 6th grader at my school in Illinois to being an unknown, awkward 7th grader at a new school with no friends, and more importantly, I had never been to a skate park. I think us kids were the real risk takers, I'm just saying. In 1977, Comp rented space in a building on the south side of the mall on 2nd Street. The main room had a board table and a desk for the founding president. There were whiteboards on the walls with the milestones and process targets to be achieved on a monthly basis. Even though our father did not perform magic at our birthday parties, he did take a page out of the official Magician's Handbook to create Comp. The old J.C. Penney's building served as the first academic facility, but before there were classrooms, there was a lot of smoke and mirrors. Before donor prospects and accrediting agency examiners would come by for a visit, my father would call his fellow magician and co-conspirator, Rod Weinberg, my future father-in-law. Rodney would assemble a team of workmen from another one of his job sites to set up lumber and sawhorses in the J.C. Penney building and use their power saws to make a lot of noise and sawdust everywhere. And that created the illusion of building activity. And it was very impressive to the visitors. Luckily, no one caught on to the fact that they did all of the framing and the original walls with tin can studs. That's right, wood was not used in the initial construction of the interior walls. Abracadabra. Building Comp in the early days was an arduous task and a real family endeavor. However, let me be clear about this. It wasn't like we kids wanted to be working countless hours there at the beginning. We were voluntold to be there. In one instance, the executive director of OPSC came into the J.C. Penney building in the midst of construction looking for the president. He asked the workers where to find him and was told that his wife was seen toward the back of the building. Hearing noise in the men's room, he walked in to find a small 12-year-old boy cleaning urinals and a lady cleaning toilet stalls. He asked the lady cleaning the toilets where he could find the president, or at least his wife. The woman said, "Hello, I am Harriet Pomerantz, the president's wife, and this is our son Richard." For some reason, he wouldn't shake my hand. My brother Andy was a high school student then who was physically capable of manual labor and was quickly put onto demolition teams and basic construction work. My sister Betsy was put to task on stuffing thousands of envelopes and other secretarial functions. Everything was moving along fine. If by fine, I mean month to month. My father's approach to fundraising in those early days was to find donors whose contributions would cover the next month's expenses. So all was fine until the great Comp flood of August 1978. The dilapidated air conditioning units were removed from the top of the J.C. Penney building for servicing. A freak thunderstorm surprised everyone, and the basement of the building was flooded. My father got the urgent phone call about the situation, grabbed me, and off we went to save the day. The building contractor also did the same by grabbing his youngest daughter and others to help. This would not have been that bad if it weren't for the fact that the cadavers had already been delivered to the gross anatomy lab and had already been set out at each table. We squeegeed, mopped, and cleaned up the smelly mess. Little did we realize that the contractor's youngest daughter, with whom I cleaned up a flooded room with dead bodies, would one day become my wife. You just can't make this stuff up. In the early days, events were primarily held at my parents' house. These always were all hands-on-deck events. Again, we were voluntold to work the events. My brother Andy would tend bar until he was off to college. Betsy would help the special events team until she was off to college. And I was the gopher, as in go for this, go for that. After Andy made his escape to college, and I grew tall enough to stand behind the bar, I assumed the role of bartender at the tender age of 16. Apparently, there weren't issues back then about child labor or alcohol laws. After years of tending bar for many of the same people, I learned what the regulars would order, and I would often have their drinks ready to go before they even ordered. My father's goal was for everyone to feel like family, and that's what we all did. On a side note, one time while tending bar at a comp function, a little girl came up to me and asked for a Tom Collins with a purple olive. I thought she was cute, and yes, that was the same girl with whom I had mopped up the gross anatomy lab and would one day become my wife. So the sense of family went both ways for our family and the comp community. When I had my bar mitzvah at the age of 13, more than half of those in attendance were part of the comp family, including Rodney and Ingrid Weinberg, who would be my future in-laws, if you see a running theme here. During one part of the ceremony that required everyone to stand for a good period of time, one of the guests passed out and slumped to the floor. The rabbi said into the microphone in a very anxious voice, "Is there a doctor in the house?" And without missing a beat, about 1/4 of the congregation immediately moved over to help the fallen man. By the way, how many of you here tonight were at my bar mitzvah 37 years ago? Yeah. Again, you can't make this stuff up. As the Comp family grew into Western University of Health Sciences, so did the Pomerantz family grow. The three of us children had our own children. My parents became grandparents to Zachary in 1989, Alexander in 1994, Clarice in 1996, Shayna in 1997, and Zoe in 2009. And since they're all here and I am a proud papa, would you all please stand and be recognized? So I hope you can appreciate that what tonight really means to our family. We love our parents very much. We're extremely proud of what they have accomplished. My father has been your president, your boss, your friend, your colleague. He is our father, a husband, a papa, a grandpa, a stalwart supporter, a mensch, a role model, and an inspiration. Thank you all for the support, love, and admiration that you have given to my parents. As a final retirement tribute to my father, I would ask that, this is a little different, but I would ask that you all join with me in singing to him, to my father, his favorite song. I believe the words are up on the screen. Dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, to run where the brave cannot go, to right the unrightable wrong, to love pure and chaste from afar, to try when your arms are too weary, to reach the unreachable star. This is my quest, to follow and soar, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, to fight the right without question or pause, to be willing to march and to help for a heavenly cause. And I know if I'll only be true to that glorious quest, that my heart will lie peaceful and calm when I'm laid to my rest. And the world